Hello, everyone. My name is Armando Perez-Carreno, and welcome to the Web Talk Show. Today with us is Tommy Cotter from Detroit, Michigan. How are you, Tommy?
Good. Good, Armando. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, Tommy. So, for the audience, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got there?
Yeah, so I work at Benzinga, and if you're not familiar with Benzinga, we are a financial media company based in Michigan, and so we write stock market news that caters towards retail investors. So anything about the stocks in the North American markets and global soon, if you're interested, we cover those markets, and yeah, that's a high level of Benzinga.
Interesting. How did you get to Benzinga? Did you start in like the stock market and all the financial world from the beginning?
Actually, so I studied mechanical engineering in school, so a little bit of an unnatural course, but I met a friend at an event, and he basically said, "Hey, we're looking for a project manager. Do you want to come on and help?" And I agreed, and the rest is history.
It's so funny how that works out, where you study something and then you end up doing something that has nothing to do with it directly. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you study any type of engineering, it's the logical way of thinking and the practical approach to find solutions. It all really helps.
I agree. I think the biggest thing that I took from engineering school was just, we're taught a certain way to think and to
Mhm.
approach a problem with almost like a toolbox mentality, right? Like I have these tools that I can use at my disposal, and when do I need to use them? So I don't know if I retained much from school, but I did retain the problem solving approach.
I think that's the most important part. People ask sometimes, should I go to college? Should I go to school? Well, I think school is good in general because you get to be with other people and learn about differences in how people go forward and learn tasks and learn new skills and knowledge, etc. And then college is a place where you're gonna meet a lot of people and you are going to see how to work in teams, and there's a lot involved in that, and it's not so much how much you're gonna learn, but it's more of a meta skill. You want to learn to learn, and that's the same apply for school. So if college is not in the cards for you, then still, if you can go somewhere that can teach you, or even if it's homeschooled, it doesn't really matter. If they teach you how to learn, that's that's the real value, because then you will apply that everywhere. Because as we all know, once you graduated from school, except perhaps doctors and people in the medical space, it's not what you learned. It's you're gonna immediately, just as soon as you get out, you're gonna start learning something new to be able to do the job that you're gonna do. So
Exactly. Yeah. Like I was telling someone the other day, like, uh, being a lifelong learner is something that everyone should aspire to do. We're never done learning, so we should always try and, pick up on new skills. Times change, right? Especially with AI nowadays. People are learning an entirely new skill set and doing their jobs completely differently than they would have, 7, 10 years ago, right? So
that's true. And the speed at which things are moving now, if you are not in that learning mindset, you're gonna get left behind. Fortunately, even if you sort of get left behind, the tools are so great that you can very quickly get up to speed if you decide to do so. But like everything, it's all about acting, it's actually doing the thing, not just consuming, which is something that happens a lot too.
yeah, agreed.
So on your day to day, what is the typical activity that you do in the role that you do?
Yeah, so at Benzinga, I'm on the API product development side.
Ooh, okay.
So we build API products mostly for businesses that are looking to consume Benzinga's information. And so at Benzinga, we have a huge editorial team, and stock market news is our bread and butter. But aside from the news, we have all of these other kind of adjacent products, products that do end up feeding the news feed in one way or another. And those are all delivered in form of API.
Mm.
Um, so um, we've built a lot of these products for our brokerage partners, and we work with all of the top five largest banks in the U.S. And then we've got a ton of smaller clients as well, mid-size and smaller clients, and we've built a lot of bespoke solutions for them and their users. So a lot of my day is filled with working closely with our clients and trying to translate their needs into requirements for our development team, and then building out these APIs in a way that meets their needs.
I see. So for someone who's listening who's not either technical nor financially inclined, why would you build an API? What's the point of people not just going to your dashboard and instead consuming an API to put what into their systems?
Yeah, so I mean, an API is really just a method of delivering data from a database to a different application. And so historically, APIs were just so much simpler than building out teams internally to gather the data that they needed, and it was just much easier to license the data
Mm.
and focus on their core offering, which is making their users happy, right? Their core offering should have never been let's build an accessory data set. It should be what do we need to do to keep our users happy? And so um, subscribing to an API endpoint is so much easier to do that. And you know, with AI now, that we're seeing so much hobbyist interest where
Mm.
users can quickly go into Claude, hook up an API and start building these generative dashboards that are very tailored for their use case.
Mm-hmm.
And it's specific to their needs. It's not, you know, a dashboard that was built to cast a wide net and meet the needs of a lot of users. It's built for them specifically.
That's a great point. Because some people might know about the Bloomberg terminal, right? Where it's this monster of a tool that's very expensive, or well, depending on for what you're using it, of course, but can give you all the data you need. At the same time, has so much customization that it could be overwhelming. So now with the LLMs and being able to tell Claude, hey, I'm in this space, I'm in this vertical, I need this sort of information. These are the types of companies, these are the types of stocks, this is the type of information that I need, that I'm interested in, and this is how I want to visualize it. And then the tool being able to generate this dashboard, like you were saying, and then just call these APIs that give you the data, that's huge for a lot of companies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes it so much easier, but at the same time, a lot of the value of these APIs is kind of, diminishing as well, because it's easier to create the data sets themselves, where you can have agents that are, they're running and they're compiling this data. Um, so yeah, I think, when companies start to think about like where they want to focus their resources, it should be on creating moats in a way where their true value is not just creating a simple API product or creating a simple dashboard product. It should be what can we do to actually deliver data that's hard to get.
Yes. I remember this client. We used to have that worked in the HR space, and while they used an API for parsing PDFs, this is before all the AI stuff, of course. Now it's very easy, you don't need an API, but they would use an API. But then the real value was in getting the right data, understanding it, parsing it in a way that was relevant to the job applicant, such that they could get the resume graded and perfected for these automated tools that people were using in companies. And so while, like you were saying, they were using an API, it wasn't just a wrapper on the API. There was a lot of extra sort of very niche specific logic there that made it be have an added value.
Yeah, yeah, and it's it's really hard to find you know specific you know use cases now where an API is truly unique. Like they're a lot of times data sets have been commoditized in today's day and age. So in the 2010s, it was a little bit easier to find truly unique data sets and APIs that were solving a very niche solution. And I think now it's been a bit more commoditized. Usually there are a handful of APIs that can accomplish one thing or another. But yeah, we'll see what happens in the next era of AI.
Is getting access to an API like the one from Benzinga something that the hobbyists, like you said, could achieve, or is it more expensive in terms of it's more like a business use kind of thing, even to get started?
Yeah, we've made it incredibly easy to get plugged into Benzinga APIs. So really, it's just like logging into the site, right? Like logging into any site. Once you log in, you can get your API key, no credit card required, and you can try all the data. You can explore the format. You can make an assessment as to whether or not it fits your use case, meets your needs, and if you're interested in moving forward after that point, then it's super easy to subscribe on our end. We wanted to make it simple enough to where if you're vibe coding at 2 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to talk to a salesperson,
Yes.
which is historically how it always went. If it's Saturday afternoon, and you want an API key, you have to fill out a form
Mm-hmm.
and then wait till Monday till someone gets back to you. You don't get the key till Wednesday. So
Yes.
we really wanted to make it simple, where anybody, anytime can get their key and start exploring.
That's great. I I know what you mean. I've had the experience when we were building tools, like stock related tools for clients. It was slow. Like just getting those expensive also, but then it was like, yes, you'll get a call, and then 3 days later I get a call from London, and it's like, oh, this is blah 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 from whatever, and then they have this long conversation trying to understand what you're trying to do, and then eventually you get into the next, and it's a whole thing. So it's great that you're making it easier to get into it because everyone's moving fast, and sometimes if you're on a roll and you've got everything you need and you just need that connection and it could just work, that'll get you into it. If you hit that barrier, you might just drop the project altogether if it wasn't a big thing. Oh, it's too complicated. Just leave it alone. And well, that's not the point, is it?
I agree. Yeah, there historically were a lot of barriers to entry, and cost was a big one too, where it was extremely costly to plug into some APIs, and now it's just become much easier.
You also talked about the editorial side, right? So you've got stock market news, and I'm not well versed in all this, but I remember that there's sort of this the part where you get the actual movements in the markets, right? And all that. Again, there's real-time data and all that, but then there's the news side of it that's based on specific things. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean when you say stock market news for those listening who, again, are not well versed in this space? It's not news like, oh, I'm seeing something on Fox or CBS or CNN on this TV. It's a different type of news, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So anytime in the market where there's a movement on a stock that's beyond, 5-7%, it's typically due to a news catalyst. So something happened related to the company, whether it was a company announcement itself or a rumor around a company that maybe exploded on socials, a very specific news catalyst has moved that stock. And so what we do at Benzinga is, our editorial team is they're watching the markets all day. We are, in addition to watching the markets, SEC filings, press releases, we are also, interviewing executives from companies.
Mm.
We are performing analysis on companies and sectors, and we're covering that in a newswire format. So we publish a lot of long form content to our website, benzinga.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also publish, newswire headlines to where, if an active trader is looking to get a quick bite-sized amount of information, they can consume the newswire headlines and get an understanding of, okay, this is the latest happenings from company XYZ, so we have a handful of different solutions for on the news side, whether it's long form or newswire, but that's kind of the gist of our news offering.
I see. Yeah, I'm looking at the site here. So is it mostly consumed by people going into the actual news section, right? Or is it more of they subscribe to these feeds, like you're saying, such that they can ingest them into their systems and then work with that data?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Um, we've got a handful of subscription offerings where you know pro users, professional users, not necessarily pro versus non-pro, but
Mm-hmm.
users that are active traders. They can subscribe to these offerings, um, and those are more advanced, right? Where we're covering thousands of headlines a day. Um, and then we also have, kind of light pared down offerings, which are, we write long form content, and we publish that to our .com website, where users can kind of consume it on the open web. Um, and then our third our third offering, and the one that I work in, is our API licensing
Mm.
business. So that's where we license these feeds out to businesses and individuals.
Now that makes sense. So these feeds, are they real-time feeds or are they sort of delayed time-based?
Yeah, all of it is mostly real time. Um, we do have some market data feeds that are delayed, right? If you want the uh, stock price for Apple and you want to display it on a website that you're building, we do have delayed options for that. But most of the time, the feeds are real time.
Yeah, good. Do you see right now, as things are moving, more usage from new companies, small, medium, than you were seeing before? Like, is it that you had your base rate of people were consuming your APIs, and did you suddenly see a spike in usage, not only trials but actual usage going forward with these people that are now like maybe some vibe coding some apps, some doing legit work? But have you seen that?
Yeah, definitely. I want to say we've seen a massive spike. I wouldn't say it's hockey stick
Mm-hmm.
shaped, but I would say it's more of a gradual build up
Mm-hmm.
since probably late 2024, where we've seen a ton of users who are kind of starting to understand APIs, how they work, and now we've got MCP servers, right, which make it so easy to plug in an MCP server to Claude or any LLM. And so yeah, we've seen a ton of interest from both individuals and businesses alike.
Yeah, I bet. I see here that you have a historical news archive of 84 terabytes. That sounds massive. So, why would someone need access to historical data, for example? What's a use case for that?
Yeah, so one and probably the most common and the most prevalent use case is for model training.
Mm,
Um, so, what someone can do is they can take a news archive and they can train a model, based on certain factors. And maybe I'll just share one as an example. But, let's say we want to train a model to sell a stock whenever XYZ happens.
mhm,
Whenever let's say, or how about we want the model to buy the stock whenever positive earnings happen.
mm,
What they can do is they can subscribe to the news archive. They can pull the timestamps from our earnings release news headlines, right?
mhm,
And they can train the model based on the timestamps of the historical price data, and they can run some back tests and train the model to execute that action. So
I
I would say
see.
that's a prevalent one, but there are, dozens of use cases.
Well, that's a good one. I want to dive a little deeper into that because a lot of people will say, "Well, I have access to the API. I could just say, oh, it went down or it went up. Buy now, sell, right?" But it's not as like you don't want to do that because you're gonna be behind. What you're saying, if I understand correctly, is you can actually use historical data to train your model to see if it would have made the right decision based on both the news and also maybe the ticker price at that point and what was happening and all that. And then, as if it was back in the day, what would have had done and and did it do it properly?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the concept of back testing is, before you deploy a strategy out into the real world, you want to make sure that it makes sense, based on all of the historical context that it has. Um, so that's, we've got other archives too. And whenever we work with hedge funds and quant shops, they always, the first question they ask us is, what is your historical archive?
Mm-hmm.
and and do you have point in time data, right? And so those are that those are back testing is super important.
As I go through here, you mentioned so many different things. Oh, the MCP server. I see you mentioned it here as well. The There are so many aspects of the trading world that if you're not in it, you're just not exposed as to what's happening, right? We hear about the stock market and we might hear about New York and Chicago and basically that's it, right? But there are many markets, right? There's a ton of different markets of different things and they all behave in different ways.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What is the Can you give a few examples of like what we're missing out on as the general public if we just think that the stock market is just the two main ones that we hear about in the news?
Yeah, um I think before someone wants to invest, they obviously need to understand their risk
Mm-hmm.
propensity. And they want to, probably outline their goals for investing. But, you know, you can get involved in the stock market and you can pick the individual stocks that you want. That's one way of doing it, and that's probably the most common way that people think of it. Um, Another way is you can get involved in the market and you can kind of pick an ETF or a mutual fund where someone else is kind of managing the holdings of
Mm-hmm.
that fund, and they're kind of making the decisions, on your behalf in the background. That's another way. And I think one interesting way, I know probably just take it this direction, let me know if we should come back to come back on course. But um, an interesting thing that's happening right now is prediction markets.
Oh.
Um, you know, with Kalshi and Polymarket, people are kind of um, they're allowed to bet on these things that historically, has never been possible. Like, they're investing their money in things like how many um, rides will Uber deliver last quarter, right? And they're able to kind of bet on a KPI associated um, with a company. And I think that's really fascinating and something that is it's kind of a new concept.
That's very interesting. I've heard a little bit about Polymarket, and we'll get into that as well. But the example that you just gave, I know a lot of people will have the same question. What's the point? Like, why would I bet against that? Who stands to gain in a transaction like that? And is the company involved at all? How does that work?
Yeah, the company isn't involved at all. I mean, it's really just a free market, right?
Mm,
Where um, if one person thinks that Uber will deliver a lot of rides in the past quarter and the other person doesn't think they will, um, you know, uh, Kalshi or Polymarket or these other prediction market platforms are basically just moving money around
I
and
see.
and fulfilling, some of these event contracts.
Wow. That's well, it's like a horse race, right? It's not that the horse is gonna make like it's a race. Someone says this one's gonna win. Someone says this one, the other one's gonna win, and you bet against it, right? It's like you're saying, it's a free market. I opened Polymarket here, and there's these in the hero section. They have a few that are swiping by as examples of things that are active right now. So there's one that U.S. Iran permanent peace deal buy, and then there's like 25% for April 22nd, 36% for April 30th. And these are the numbers that I'm reading here. And so people are betting against that. And then there's like Bitcoin, whether it's gonna go up or down, and it's just and you see the graph. It's just going along. I had no idea this was what's going on. This is very interesting. So there's obviously the Strait of Hormuz traffic returns to normal by the end of April. There's sports there as well. Very interesting. There's crypto, esports, finance. Where what will WTI crude hit in April? Geopolitics, tech, culture. Do you have an idea? It's fine if you don't, but do you have an idea when this sort of approach started?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty recent um, approach, and I would say I don't know when Kalshi and Polymarket came online. I think they're probably the two largest in the space, but within the last couple of years, I'd say.
Wow. And is this I don't want how can this work? Is it regulated anyway?
Yes, I don't have all the answers in this
No, that's
department
fine.
either, but I would say there is some loose regulation around it. I'm sure there will be more regulation tightening in the future. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to see it all unfold.
Yeah, especially the types of things that are on here. It's like Elon Musk number of tweets from April 7th to April 14th, 2026.
Yeah,
And there's like 300 to 319 and it's 53%. And then some other people are saying 280 to 289. But there's a $14 million volume weekly. What is
yeah,
this?
it's insane. The amount of volume that's going out there for things like that is uh is insane.
This is very interesting. I only have heard about Polymarket because someone, I don't know, they were probably using an open claw or something to try to get gains on Polymarket, right? Doing some research or whatever and trying to sell, go up and down or whatever. Like, and as we know, can go horribly wrong or you could do well, but it's the same as having an analyst that's doing the things, right? It's just whether you program them properly or not. Um, and this is super interesting. I'm glad you brought it up. And so you can just go in and say like, oh yes, 99 cents or whatever, and just put an amount of how much you're.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you just, you go in and you place your bid and maybe I'll just bring up another interesting caveat related to prediction markets, but a lot of people um have been thinking about prediction market arbitrage
mm-hmm.
and how they can almost guarantee themselves a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And um so, what they can do is, they can find the same event on two different prediction markets, whether that's Kalshi or Polymarket. I'll just use those two as an example. Um, I think Kalshi is maybe only available in the US at the moment, and then Polymarket is the big global market. But they'll find the same event on both markets. So let's use the Donald Trump tweets,
Mm-hmm.
uh, event. So what they could do is on Kelshi, they could say, "Hey, I think that he'll have more than X number
Mm-hmm.
of tweets." And then on Polymarket, they can say, "Hey, I think he'll have less than X number of tweets." And so they can kind of hedge themselves
Mm-hmm.
and they can do so in a way that they'll guarantee themselves a profit. And
Mm-hmm.
so many people on X and all over the place, they've been building these arbitrage bots uh, to make that happen.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I see. Well, people are creative, and at the end of the day, it's like when you see these VC companies go in and acquire a bunch of companies, you think, or if you're outside the space, and again, I'm no expert in this manner, but someone was explaining to me the other day, it's not like they are expecting all of them to do well. They are building a portfolio that they know at least one of them should do very well. And so even if they take losses on the rest of them, there's a high likelihood based on what they predicted that one of them it's going to explode so much that regardless of if they lost on the other ones, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Every VC, I think, will kind of explain that's their strategy. I think it was Bezos that said this, but if you've got a 10% chance that one of your investments will 100x, you should take that bet every time.
Hmm.
And I think that's the kind of the VC culture.
Yes. Yes. This is very interesting. So, did you immediately after getting out of mechanical engineering get into this? Like, you started in the company and that's it? Or did you get into the startup space or some other route?
Yeah, so actually, my path was a little unconventional, like I said, but what I did was I went to Oakland University
Mm.
to play basketball. That was pretty much the only reason why I went there. One of the only reasons. It was a great school, good location too. But I went there to play basketball. Didn't really know what I was going to study, so I studied. My aunt suggested that I should study engineering, and I'm like, oh, okay, we'll do that. And so after school, a lot of engineering students at Oakland University, and it's in Detroit, Michigan, by the way, not California.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of students go right down the street and they work at Fiat Chrysler, which
Mm-hmm.
is one of the big three. Um, and so that's what I did. I followed on that kind of, standard path. Um, and I worked there, as an intern. And so it was also COVID times. So
Mm.
I just, I was working in the auto industry and realized that it was not a place for me, not going to be sustainable. And so I decided to jump ship and came over to the fintech space. And that's kind of my trajectory.
Yeah, we've all got interesting ways to get to where we are, right? But everything that you do along the way helps for experience to for the next thing, right?
Yeah.
What is one of the most, I don't know, interesting things that you've seen in the space where you came to a work one day and you were like, wow, I can't believe this thing happened and it just blew your mind.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many of these instances. I think I'm gonna have to think about this for a sec, but um, I would say just understanding the media landscape
Mm.
holistically is something that I myself didn't think about a lot before I got to Benzinga. Um, I had a partial understanding of what an API was, had used the Alpaca API before, and so I knew how they worked, but I didn't really understand the media space. And the big thing with the media space is it's all, most of the value is derived from page views and
Mm.
impressions. So if you can get a large number of people to see your content,
Mm.
whether that's on your website or on your socials, um, you can usually monetize those users pretty well. Um, and so, what media companies do is, you know, they try to get as many eyeballs on their content as possible. And some companies will run advertisements to do that. A lot of it is native. Um, and once they have eyeballs on their content, um, then they can start selling ads. And so ad revenue becomes a large revenue stream for media companies. Um, and that was really unique to me. I didn't understand. I mean, I know would see ads all the time, but I didn't understand the dynamics of it.
Mm.
And so, I would say advertising was one thing that I found interesting and
Yeah.
novel.
Yeah, if you've never been in it or been exposed to how it works, you just see them splattered everywhere. You're like, what's this? Who cares or whatever. But at the end of the day, an advertisement, if it's well positioned and it's targeted properly, then it's good. I don't mind seeing an ad for something that I might actually want. If I just constantly see ads that I don't like, then yeah, it bothers me.
Yeah, yeah.
You said socials. Does a company like Benzinga also do, because this type of content, some might consider it's like boring content, but at the end of the day, it's really interesting content. It all depends on how you frame it, right? So do companies like yours go into actually creating, I don't know, TikTok videos or viral type videos where it's not just a still image or a slideshow, but rather something that everyone else is doing in the viral space and getting a ton of views?
Yeah, yeah, Benzinga, we are kind of doubling down on our social strategy. So, everyone knows that, kind of social media and the short form video consumption is kind of the way that a lot of people consume information now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we don't want to neglect that. So yeah, we create content, and a lot of it is like, 30-second clips.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what we'll do is we'll take our news content and
Yeah.
and transpose that into video form and deliver it via socials, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Um, and so yeah, I think, especially with the younger audience, Gen
Mm-hmm.
Z, um, if you say, "Hey, go read this 3-page research report," it's all in there. All the
Mm-hmm.
information's there. Um, I think they'll probably tell you to get lost, but yeah. So we definitely do focus on video as well.
Yeah, that's great because it's the news. And I, for one, would much more likely enjoy reading about the market news or whatever as short form content if it's well made, if it doesn't really matter how. It could be a person talking, it could be animations, graphics, whatever, but if it's visual and auditory and I can quickly get the gist of the information, then great. And you have all the source data right there, right? So if it's constantly pouring out, it's much better than going on the TV and going through a million commercials and just cycling through three news articles that might not be relevant at all. Then yeah, I think you're definitely uniquely positioned to have all that content. That's great. I'll have to look into it as well. Do you see a lot of misuse? I know you work in the API department. Is is it common to see people who are using the APIs in a way that's not allowed and that they have to be shut down, for example?
Um, I would say we don't see it often. There are a handful of cases where um, individuals will, or businesses too. We've seen it in the past where um, you know they'll exceed their rate limits on their key, and
Mm-hmm.
that's typically a way that we can monitor usage, make sure that no one is abusing services. And our rate limits are pretty lenient, but if it ever gets to the point where, it's like, okay, this is abusive, or this, type of request is not compliant, we reach out to users and let them know that. But one thing that I will say with on a business misuse standpoint is, sometimes what companies will do is they'll try to sign up for a service as an individual user,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll use an API to power their platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, systems in place to detect that type of behavior. And I would say that that's the most prevalent um, misuse scenarios when someone will, kind of self-report a lower amount of users, and then we find out, hey, you're distributing the content to, your platform that has a
Mm-hmm.
million users. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen that before in the past. It's not super common, but it does happen.
Hmm. And if you decide to do it as a business, then you can put it into your platform and have users access it.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And any data licensor, operates this way, right? They want to understand how their data is being used because, at the end of the day, the data is their service, and
Hmm.
in order for them to offer the best service, they need to have terms and terms in place for the usage.
Yeah, well, I know embedding and that sort of thing is typically a touchy subject with certain platforms. I remember one time one of our clients was doing a Tableau reporting with a lot of data, but then they wanted to put it on their website for internal access for their customers. And if they wanted to do that, just to be able to do that change, they needed to pay $113,000 license. And it was really expensive. That we ended up moving over to Power BI, which is more lenient in that way. But I have seen that where it's like some companies might be more enterprise oriented, I guess, and so they have to protect it that way. But I like that you have that ability because many people will want that. And if you're starting out, you can't pay a huge licensing fee just for your 22 users that are on free trials, right? Um, uh, but want to be able to at some point scale it.
Yeah, yeah, scalability is key. And we're the type of company where we never like everything we do is very flexible. So we never operate from a rigid, standpoint where, hey, you have to pay us this exorbitant fee for licensing the data. We always want to, start with a partner. Let's start small, if they're small, and let's grow together.
Mm,
And
that's
and
nice.
so that's kind of our motto.
That's nice. If so, I'm trying to determine an example here. So let's say I wanted to build a stock trading game for kids to learn about stocks and how the market works. I remember when we were in high school, there was this website or whatever. You could do like fantasy football, but fantasy stocks, right? And you could sort of have a thing. But let's say I want to create my own with my own twist, and I want to be able to teach kids how it works and all that good stuff. So plugging into an API like this would allow me to do that without having to generate or create or purchase a huge data set in order to do something like that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to hear your thoughts on what the game might be too, by the way. But yeah, it's very easy, um, it's very easy to create these apps, quickly subscribe to an API key. Okay, let's vibe code this game, and then let's see how many users we have, and and then we always scale, like I said, with the partner. So we'll start small, and then as you grow, fees will obviously grow too.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of opportunities in the space still because I have no idea what the percentage is, but I bet the percentage of people who are actually in the market is very small. Who are actively. I mean, many people through second or third party because of retirement or whatever. Then yeah, but directly trading, no. And I don't I don't think many people understand the stock market until they're older, a lot older, and they just see like what is this? Why does it make sense? Like, is it a real thing? Is it imaginary? Like they say with Bitcoin, like there's all this, and so having some way to teach it, I think would be interesting if you could make it creative and gamify it, right? But like that, there's tons of other interesting ideas. That's cool. I I didn't know that you had this offering and the people who I've worked with, companies that we've worked with to provide solutions for clients, they're all they just firstly they've fit in the box that you mentioned at the beginning. You take long time to get contracts signed and API set up and all that, and then it's expensive, especially like it's prohibitive completely if you're trying to MVP something. Like it's just not a thing. So So this has been super interesting. Is there anything that you would like to recommend to people if they want to start maybe consuming some of these API products, if they're trying to vibe code something, any gotchas that you might have seen that you want to help people avoid when they're doing stuff like this?
Yeah. Um, I will say just having a general understanding of what an API is
Mm.
a great place to start. Um, if you can understand that an API is a delivery mechanism for data and it'll get data from point A to point B, um, I think that's important. And then the next step would be, understanding how API authentication works
Mm.
generally. Generally you use an API key. You don't want to share that API key with anyone. You don't want to publish it in your public GitHub repository. Um, those are a couple of gotchas, and there are even services now that'll scan GitHub for leaked API keys, and I'm sure that the volume of that over the past year has exploded. Just because there are a lot of novice developers that are just getting started and
Hmm.
making that mistake. And then they check their open AI bill and they, they see some crazy number. So that's a gotcha that you want to avoid. Um, but yeah, I would say, MCPs make it very easy now to
Mm.
log in. Okay, now the server is authenticated. Now you can kind of talk in natural language and you can instruct the model on what you want to do. And that's the easiest way to get started, and is just use an MCP server, um, talk to the model, explain it what you want, and start to generate some cool ideas.
That's awesome. Yeah, just get started, right? It's all about not being afraid, which especially for the older crowd, and I mean older, just not Gen Z, right? It's sometimes we hesitate to start something in new and ask it, and oh, will it break? Because things used to break a lot, and so it's very interesting to see that change where you just try something and you see the magic of it doing something, and you know that it's so quick to generate things that if it does make a mistake, you can just roll it back and just try again, and it'll do it in 3 seconds. So
Yeah,
just
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm telling Cursor all the time, like, oops, you went too far. Please fix that.
yes, yes. All right, Tommy. It has been super interesting. I've learned a lot today about how this all works, and thank you for sharing about Polymarket. I really had no idea that was going on. That's gonna be a fun thing to just look at and explore to see what people are doing, because it also gives us a little bit of a taste as to what people are thinking, right? The fact that we see all these items. If people want to learn more about Benzinga, where should they go? Should they go to their socials, their website? What's a good place?
Yeah, good places both. Benzinga.com/APIs is where you can find out more information about our API offerings. And then you can hit us up on Twitter at Benzinga anytime, um, and also on LinkedIn and Instagram, etc.
Awesome. All right, I'll put those in the show notes. Thanks again, Tommy. It was a real pleasure having you on the show. And for those listening, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so that you can be aware whenever we release a new episodes. Typically, we are recording Tuesdays and Thursdays, so make sure you're subscribed so that you see everything new that's coming up. Thanks again, Tommy, and we'll see you
Thank
in
you
the
so
next one.
much. Take care. Bye bye.
You too.